And line 4 says, the headboard of a young bull, great good fortune. Gosh, I've gotten this line a few times. It says this line and the one following it are the two that tame the forward-pushing lower lines. Now this is, let me just mention, this is important. These truths usually have echoic rings, like dropping a pebble in a pond. You'll find concentric rings of meaning. Your psyche is written everywhere, right? The interior qualities of your psyche are in your hairstyle, it's in the clothing that you pick, it's in your handwriting, it's in the iris, it's in the ear functions. It's written everywhere. Everything you do will have the same flaw in it. Robert Bly says, every room I rented in my 20s had unfinished boards somewhere. You think it was trying to tell me something? These qualities of the psyche are written everywhere in echoic rings. So you think about doing spirit work, and if you're training people to do spirit work, these two lines are the first place I would start to say, look, you're working with real powers and they're not conscious ego powers, and the first thing you're going to need to do is learn some modesty, learn a centered rather than a forward-leaning, effortful, learn an allowing rather than a pushing, cooperation rather than leadership, following rather than leading at times. This is how the ego learns to work with the invisible powers or the higher self. So these things are not necessarily only physical obstructions. Gosh, it'd be nice if we knew what was going to happen with the building, but it's not correct to. It's okay, it's just fine, and they're looking out for your long-run evolution. And so this is appropriate. It says, this headboard of the bull image, let me say what that's about. It's taming the forward-pushing lowered lines, and the ego always wants to push forward and get results now. Let's fix it tonight. Let's get some immediately, okay? Before a bull's horns grow out, they used to fasten a headboard to its forehead so that later when the horns appear, they can't do any harm. A good way to restrain wild force is to forestall it, to stretch it out. I'd like to have an argument, but maybe I'll have it tomorrow. All right, I'll be obnoxious tomorrow. And then tomorrow maybe I'll put it off till afternoon. And by afternoon, I'm over it, and I don't need to be obnoxious. And okay, good. I didn't want to talk myself. I wasn't willing to give up the right to get mad at that person, but I just put it off until I realized, I don't like acting that way. I'm not going to do it. So this is just a clever method for managing the ego. This modern Mrs. Ching says, be extremely careful not to dissipate your resources before the time is ripe. So what they're telling you is there's an evolutionary arc on its way here, and it's most obstructed in the beginning, and it's going to get better, and so on. And if we're looking at long-term, easy in the beginning builds a more durable institute for doing good in the long run. So this says, be extremely careful not to dissipate your resources before the time is right. Hold back. By thinking ahead, you can anticipate difficulties. We always anticipate, I try to anticipate success usually. Oh, how's this going to work, and what are we going to do next? And they're saying, well, okay, use some of your ego capacity to anticipate possible difficulties and thereby avoid them. Take action now to prevent them from becoming a reality. So that's putting the headboard on now before the bull is dangerous. That's saying, look, there are already forces in the situation that if they were to run amok, if they were to go too much for it, if they weren't tamed and balanced and harmonized now, they're not a trouble now, they're a hint now. But if allowed to continue, they would be trouble later. Okay? And so that's part of the early work of building an enduring organization. If you want a flash in the pan, exciting organization, you just leap ahead and get everybody together in the team and go gung-ho while there's a lot of energy. But you don't look at the foundations and you don't harmonize what are the possible trends that might not be working together, and then trouble shows up in stage 3. Right? This is typical organizational structure. And they're saying, no, this is much too important to allow that to happen. So this is where you train the staff and you anticipate and you really build a solid team that can do well with limited amounts, and then you add the power to the team once you have everything clear and stabilized and working well. Brian Brown Walker says of that line, it's futile to act out of strong emotion. So there's another hint. As we get specific about it, there are emotional energies, emotional issues that people may have strong feelings about, and those need to be resolved and balanced and clarified before we turn up the psychic energy. Or you end up with trouble. Things look fine now, and the energy turns up, and whoops, those things that were kind of a little issue before are a problem now. Others will not be receptive. Still yourself and let the door open of its own accord. Still yourself and let the door open of it. That says if you're going to serve the spirits, boy, they would like a couple of levels of demonstration that we're really here in service and not just running things our way. And come on, spirits, come in. I've seen people who do spirit healing. All right, come on, spirits, we're ready for you now. It's like, oh, God, who works for who here? So that's step 2, they say, in building, because the question is important to the whole future. Then we get to the top line of 26, and then it says, now one attains the way of heaven, success. Well, that's what you want. If you're trying to attain the way of heaven, the emotional energies and the ambition energies and the ego plans get tamed first, and then you end up doing the work of the invisibles. One attains the way. If the invisibles can work with me, as headstrong and overeducated as I started out, they can work with anybody, I'm convinced. At the 3rd stage, one attains the way of heaven, success. The time of obstruction is past in stage 3. The energy long dammed up by inhibition forces its way out and achieves great success. This refers to a person honored by the ruler and whose principles now prevail and shape the world. Well, when you're working with spirit guides, to be honored by the rulers and have those principles work through us and actually begin rechanging and shaping people's lives and improving the world, that's a tremendous achievement, and that's phase 3 of this process. And they say with careful preparation, that's where this leads. It says, Mrs. Ching says about that, the Sarah Denning translation says, the resources that you have steadily accumulated can at last be used. You can now achieve something truly worthwhile. Nothing holds you back from achieving your aims and enjoying great success. Ego taming, power comes through. That's the structure we have. Brian Brown Walker says in the 6th line, obstacles are removed. Creative energy, guided by humility and correctness, meets with success. I have to have the humility because I get humble whenever there are greater beings present, and the humility invites greater beings. And correctness means it's not enough to be humble, you got to do the right thing and have a humble attitude. And that's the trouble, is getting that middle line right down, to rightness and a humble attitude. That takes us to the top of the first hexagram, and then it turns into hexagram 32. And hexagram 32 in the traditional Wilhelm is called duration, and duration, hexagram 32. In the sphere of social relationships, it represents the institution of marriage as the enduring union of the sexes. And duration has success. There's no blame. Perseverance now furthers one to have somewhere to go. Duration is a state of movement that is not worn down by hindrances. That's why we have to work with the hindrances first and tame the ego so we're not struggling against them, because that will always wear out in time. It's not a state of rest. Mere standstill is a regression. Duration is the self-contained and therefore self-renewing movement. Self-contained and self-renewing. That's what you have to have if this is going to have enduring value. And this is really an answer that says this is a center that could do good for a very long time if the foundations are laid carefully. It's the self-contained and self-renewing movement of an organized, you have to have good organization, firmly integrated whole, taking place in accordance with immutable laws and beginning anew at every ending. So this is like breath, they say, where the inward movement, the inhalation, the contraction turns into a new beginning, in which then movement is directed back outward, in exhalation, in expansion. And they talk about how heavenly bodies exemplify duration. So likewise, the dedicated man embodies an enduring meaning in his way of life, and thereby the world is formed. Because this is about bringing order and consciousness into the world. Most of illness has to do with some sort of chaos or disorder, some contradiction of spiritual forces or laws. And to bring people into harmony with the invisible realm, that's the way of heaven that they were just talking about. The superior man stands firm and does not change his direction. The independent person keeps abreast of the time and changes with it, but what endures is the unswerving directive, the inner law of his being, which determines all his actions. So this is a model that's really designed on enduring value, so that the energy is self-renewing. It's not a big push. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon, and you have to have cycles of giving energy and rebuilding energy and constant renewal, so that it has real durability and can last. It says, remain steady and allow the world to shape itself, in the Bryant Brown Walker translation. Receiving this hexagram is an encouragement to endure, to move ahead by abiding in what's true and correct. It's not a time to let the ego swell with success, nor to despair at misfortune, simply a time to hold to the path of essential truth. So and he talks specifically, don't indulge in judgment, impatience, or ambitious thinking, by concerning yourself only with what's essential and true and good, only with what's in front of you and your correct relationship to it, you meet with great good fortune, and so on. So this is saying there are outer obstructions to be worked at. There are inner emotions to be tamed. Those are the two preparatory levels. And in the third level, then the energies of heaven, of the invisible realm, pour through and make real transformative differences in a way that's pure and in harmony with the heavens, in harmony with the invisible. And then using that energy in a consistent, ongoing, self-renewing, self-contained inner dependence. We talked about the dependence. This says independence. This gives you a duration, like a long marriage with the spirits, a long period of service. So it's a very nice, very clear kind of reading. This is your business plan from the I Ching. Okay?
So
Yeah.
So when you have, a changing hexagram, the second one is seen as a result of how you handle the first. Is that what you?
Oftentimes, but not always. It turns out to be, it would be nice if there were simple rules. That's the hardest question to answer that people always ask. Mm-hmm. The I Ching can answer in 1 to 7 steps. And they say, well, what does that mean? It means exactly the same thing as when Shakespeare wrote his plays in 1 to 7 acts. Why did he do that? Oh, let me count the ways. Sometimes it's if you do this and it's going to turn into this. And sometimes it's, look, you got a choice of this or this, and if you want to get here, you better do this. And sometimes it's a look, you got to go through this and this and this, and then it's going to lead to this. This one is fairly clear to me. Step 1 is the outer obstructions that can't be forced. You have to go with the time. Step 2 is the inner emotions and ambitions and the human egos that I'm working with God and I'd like to do great things. It could be a little inflating. You got to watch it, And so there's the personal taming level. Step 3 says then the real power does come through, and there is true harmony with heaven, and it really makes a difference. And step 4 is, and now learn how to manage that energy so that it's recurring loops, so that there's down times, and you have the staff retreat, and everybody gets renewed, and you work again, and then you nourish the people, and there's rest periods. Learn how to handle that heaven energy so that it lasts on the long haul. That's a pretty clear layout of what the structure is. Okay. Any closing questions just from what we've stirred up here?
Are you going to explain how to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll show you, we'll teach you how to, if you take the workshop, we'll explain how you draw that and how you look it up in the book and how you know which one to read. And then secondly, how to spend enough time with it until it clicks, until it makes sense. But at least now you have a live demonstration of how you answer a very important question and how seriously the I Ching takes it, and by implication, how seriously the invisibles take this center, and providing such careful and thorough guidance and wanting the center to be here for a long time, to do real good and to do that over a long period of time. That's a pretty wonderful answer. So thanks for having me here. I asked the I Ching, by the way, I said, what should I tell them about you tonight? And they said 2 things. And let's see, they said, tell them about work on what's been spoiled by the Father. That's one of the things I'm best at, huh? And It said, meaning anybody who's an authority is an imperfect being. Our fathers and our mothers and our politicians and everybody who we look up to is here on the earth plane, and they're human beings with light and dark elements not entirely resolved. And so you come here in part to get wounded, you know? The old shamans say it's only where your wounds are that you've healed that you are a teacher of healing. And so the old shamans used to say, pray for a good wound, you know? And so he said, the first thing I can be of help with is whatever the culture, whatever the authorities, whatever your fathers have done that wounded you, this is where you come to correct it. Don't just live as you are. Don't keep their limitations. Honor your fathers, honor your forefathers by correcting their mistakes and carrying out their strong points. Huh? That's the best thing we can do. He says, I'm very good at helping with that. And then that turns into one called the cauldron. In the cauldron, the ting used to be the ceremonial vessel that they used to serve the students and the spiritual gatherings. And it's like a huge turkey platter. Actually, some are so big you could stand inside of them. They're huge ceremonial vessels. They're transpersonal. It means once you heal what's been ruined, spoiled by the fathers, then you can be a vessel that carries energies that are meant for many more than just yourself. To be a vessel that carries that kind of energy is to serve mankind or to serve many people other than one's own self. So that's what the I Ching asked me to tell you, so I ought to throw that in. And yet that's what we've been talking about, self-correction and guidance for growth and healing, and on the other hand, how to carry energies and be of service to others. So those are the two primary functions. And also, there's some handouts, if you would pass those around, Debbie. Thank you much, and I wish the Caritas Center well, and I'm glad to provide this guidance from the big kids. Here's what they have to say, so thank you. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ron Mesa, the same person you've been watching, except that it's now May of 2019, 15 years after that Caritas Center lecture and I Ching demonstration. I've retired from private practice now, but my partner Debbie Hart and I are still actively teaching the I Ching through online video classes. Debbie rediscovered this long-lost Caritas lecture, and I've updated it for YouTube since it covers a lot of ground for the beginner, and it includes a live demonstration of an I Ching reading. This is also a very rare chance to include a follow-up assessment of the reading itself. First, I must admit that I found that exact same shirt I was wearing in the back of a closet, and I was mildly tempted to wear it for this segment as a joke. Well, far from joking, this remarkable I Ching reading spelled out a pathway to the possibility of long-term success at spiritual healing. Most new organizations don't survive, but this one has. I love that someone even asked in the video if there would be a follow-up to that reading. That's the only time I've ever been asked that question, and it turns out that in this case the answer is yes, and this brief video is that unexpected and rare follow-up 15 years later. So, regarding the 4 issues emphasized in the reading, how did things actually turn out? Director of the Caritas Center, Gloria Coelho, who arranged and introduced this talk, did, along with her co-workers, what step 1 of the 4-part reading advised. They avoided forcing matters during a very difficult and chaotic beginning phase. Following this strategy, they were able to keep their lease and earn nonprofit, tax-deductible status. So the first comment of 4 offered relevant, helpful advice, which contributed to a successful outcome. In keeping with step 2 of the reading, Gloria and staff did adequately prepare for and avoid many of the challenges of working with spiritual or transpersonal forces. The best evidence is that the Caritas Center has continued to provide classes and nonprofit healing services at this location for 15 years now. So, step 2 of the original reading was again sound spiritual advice that supported their enduring success. Many people have benefited from their delivery of healing and educational services because Caritas has been able to pursue step 3 of the I Ching reading, which said literally to bring heaven and earth together, meaning to unite invisible spiritual energies, the heaven part, to address people's health needs in our practical physical world. One of the new translations that we use, Hilary Barrett's 2011 version of the I Ching, describes the Caritas Center's goal of spirit healing The way is open for heaven's power, that's spiritual energy, to travel through the earth to those in need of healing. Well, precisely the center's goal. How might it help? Energy is released and, quote, the currents of change flow faster, deeper, and more powerfully. And this heaven energy is, quote, strong and true, and you can have confidence in it. Those who move with it will flourish. The final step, number 4 of the reading, the second hexagram, hexagram 32, or duration, is all about the goal of long-term endurance. That reading predicted the possibility of an ongoing, enduring service and specified how to make it come true, which it has. They are still teaching and serving after 15 years. They're now transitioning to a more online presence at www.caritascenter.org. The I Ching not only encouraged the center, it warned them when and where to hold back. It predicted the future potential of this risky new venture very accurately, and it clarified the critical steps needed for ongoing service. The I Ching was an ideal source to ask about this sort of human cooperation with invisible spirit allies, since that cooperation underlies every I Ching reading. 15 years later, Debbie and I still begin each day with an I Ching reading for each of us. If you'd like to learn more about the I Ching, or if you want to test it out as a resource in your own life, check out our step-by-step, visually rich, and highly rated classes on the I Ching. Our 2-hour video classes are on special offer with the link below at a huge discount. The new classes are more user-friendly than this talk. They have the benefit of Debbie Hart as the female co-teacher to balance the excess yang with some yin. They're carefully scripted, short video lectures with many animations and photos and videos that Debbie and I have added to enrich your learning. Plus, you get direct access to ask us questions. Check out the classes below. You can watch some of the lectures for free, and there's a money-back guarantee, so you can't lose. Thank you for watching this time capsule of the I Ching's guidance in 2004 to a newborn healing effort. The I Ching supported, guided, and helped the Caritas Center to thrive. It can help you as well. Thank you, and be well.